General Marcus Cole stood in the command center of Earth military headquarters. Screens covered every wall. Reports came in from every colony. Numbers rolled across the displays. Volunteers, equipment, ships, everything humanity had was being counted and prepared. Marcus was 60 years old with gray hair and a face full of scars. He had fought in 3 wars during his life. He had seen death up close many times, but he had never seen anything like this. In the first week after Katie Morgan's death, 500,000 soldiers volunteered for service. Not drafted, not forced. They walked into recruitment offices on their own. They signed their names. They put on uniforms. They were ready to fight. And more kept coming every day. They called themselves Katie's Legion. The name spread from soldier to soldier until everyone used it. They wore patches with her face on their shoulders. They wrote her name on their helmets. She had become more than a victim. She had become a symbol. Ryan Brooks was one of the first to volunteer. He was 26 years old, a Marine from Texas with broad shoulders and steady hands. He had served 2 tours on the outer colonies before the war. He was good at his job, but this time was different. Ryan had lost his own sister 5 years ago. Cancer had taken her slowly. He had held her hand at the end. He had watched the light fade from her eyes. When he saw Katie Morgan on the news, he saw his sister's face. He saw every innocent person who had ever been taken too soon. He did not sleep that night. The next morning, he walked into the recruitment office and signed up for the assault division. They made him a sergeant and gave him command of a squad. 10 soldiers who would follow him anywhere. On the other side of Earth, Lieutenant Commander Nicole Vance worked in the Naval Strategy Center. She was 32 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes. Her mind worked like a computer. She could look at a battle map and see patterns that others missed. Nicole had graduated top of her class at the Naval Academy. She had written papers on tactics that changed how the fleet operated, but she had never planned a war of this size. The admirals gave her a simple order: find a way to win. Find a way to make the Varakians pay. She worked 18 hours a day. She drank coffee until her hands shook. She studied every piece of information they had about the enemy. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. After 2 weeks, she presented her plan. She called it Operation Thunderstrike. The admirals studied it. They asked questions. They ran simulations. In the end, they approved it. The plan was bold. The plan was risky, but it could work. Far away, in the Varakian Dominion, the High Council gathered in their great chamber. Their gray faces showed no emotion. They did not feel fear. They had ruled their empire for 10,000 years. They had crushed dozens of species. Humans were nothing to them. The council leader spoke. His name was Vethrak, and he was the oldest among them. His voice was like grinding rocks. "The humans make noise," he said. "They beat their chests like animals. Let them. They will tire soon. They will remember their place." The other council members agreed. They laughed at the reports of human mobilization. 500,000 soldiers? The Dominion had armies in the billions. Human ships? Toys compared to Varokian warships. "They are children playing at war," another council member said. "When they come, we will break them. Then they will kneel." Kethral stood before the council. He wore medals on his chest. The council had made him a hero. They had given him honors and titles. He had become famous across the Dominion. Everywhere he went, people cheered for him. He gave interviews to the news channels. He told the story of how he killed the human girl. He laughed about it. He said it was easy. He said humans were soft and weak. He said they would never dare to attack. "I did what any Varakian would do," he said to the cameras. "I showed them the truth. "We are the masters of this galaxy. They are nothing." The Varakian people believed him. They had been taught all their lives that they were superior. They had conquered so many species. Why would humans be any different? But not everyone was so sure. The Thelian collective watched from their own territory. They were an old species too, with blue skin and large eyes. They had fought the Varakians many times over the centuries. They had won some battles and lost others. They knew the Dominion was powerful. But the Thelians also watched the humans. They studied the reports. They counted the ships being built. They measured the anger in human broadcasts. Ambassador Kelvor spoke to his leaders. "The Varokians have made a mistake," he said. "They see humans as weak because they are young, but youth means hunger. Youth means passion. Youth means they have nothing to lose." The Thelian leaders listened, but said nothing. They would wait and watch. They would see what the humans would do. Back on Earth, the preparations continued. Factories worked day and night. Shipyards built new vessels faster than ever before. Scientists developed new weapons. Engineers designed new armor. Everyone had a job. Everyone worked. Ryan Brooks trained with his squad every day. They learned to fight in space. They learned to fight on alien worlds. They learned to use every weapon in the human arsenal. They became brothers and sisters in arms. At night, Ryan would sit alone and look at a picture of his sister. Next to it, he had placed a picture of Katie Morgan that he had cut from a newspaper. Two girls who would never grow old. Two reasons to fight. Nicole Vance finalized the fleet movements. 500 warships would make the journey. Carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and landing ships. It was the largest fleet in human history. It would carry 500,000 soldiers across the stars. Admiral Chris Donovan was chosen to command the fleet. He was 65 years old, with white hair and kind eyes. He had served in the Navy for 40 years. He was known for being calm under pressure. He was known for caring about his crew. Chris had a granddaughter named Emma. She was 16 years old. When he saw the news about Katie Morgan, he thought of Emma. He thought about what he would do if someone hurt her. The thought filled him with cold fire. He accepted the command without hesitation. 3 months after Katie's death, the fleet was ready. 500,000 soldiers stood at attention on 100 different ships. They waited for the order to move. President Hayes addressed them through a live broadcast. His face appeared on every screen in every ship. "You are the answer," he said. "You are the message we send back to those who think they can hurt us. You are Katie's Legion. You fight for her. You fight for every child who looks at the stars with wonder. You fight for humanity itself." He paused. His voice grew hard. "Show them what happens when you hurt one of ours. Show them that humanity protects its own. Show them that we do not forgive. We do not forget. We do not surrender." The soldiers cheered. The sound echoed through every ship. Then the engines fired. The fleet moved forward. 500 ships entered hyperspace as one. The Varokian early warning station detected the human fleet 3 hours before it arrived. The officer on duty stared at his screen. He counted the signals. He counted again. Then he sent an emergency message to the High Council. 500 ships, 500,000 soldiers. They were coming. The council received the message, but did not panic. They had faced large fleets before. They had always won. This would be no different. They ordered their forces to prepare for battle. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Varokian territory. The ships spread out in formation. Carriers in the center. Destroyers on the flanks. Cruisers moving forward like wolves hunting prey. Admiral Chris Donovan stood on the bridge of the flagship Vengeance. The ship was the largest in the fleet. It carried 5,000 crew members and enough weapons to level a city. Chris looked out at the stars and thought of his granddaughter, Emma. He thought of Katie Morgan. He thought of every child who deserved to grow up safe. "All ships report ready," his first officer said. "Awaiting your orders, Admiral." Chris nodded. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Admiral Donovan. We have crossed into enemy territory. From this moment on, we are at war. Remember why you are here. Remember who you fight for. Katie's Legion, move out. The fleet advanced. The first target was a Varakian forward base on a moon called Kethros 4. The base protected the approach to Varakian core worlds. It had strong shields, heavy weapons, and 10,000 soldiers. The Varakians expected a long siege. They had supplies for months. They believed they could hold out until reinforcements arrived. They were wrong. Nicole Vance had designed a new tactic. Instead of attacking from space and waiting for the shields to fall, the humans would go around them. Atmospheric insertion pods would carry soldiers directly through the atmosphere. They would land inside the base perimeter before the Varakians could react. Ryan Brooks and his squad were in the first wave. They climbed into their pods and strapped in. The pods were small and cramped. Each one held 5 soldiers. There was barely room to breathe. A voice came through the speakers. Launch in 30 seconds. Good luck, soldiers. Make them pay. Ryan closed his eyes. He thought of his sister. He thought of Katie. He gripped his rifle tight. The pod launched. The feeling was like being shot from a cannon. The pod screamed through space toward the moon below. Warning lights flashed. The heat shield glowed red. The whole pod shook like it was going to fall apart. Then they hit atmosphere. The shaking got worse. Ryan could hear his squadmates praying and cursing. He said nothing. He just held on. The hatch blew open. Sunlight and dust flooded in. Ryan was the first one out. He found himself in the middle of the enemy base. Varakian soldiers were everywhere. They had not expected humans to fall from the sky. For a moment, they just stared. Ryan raised his rifle and fired. The battle for Kethros 4 was brutal. Hundreds of pods had landed across the base. Human soldiers poured out and attacked. The Varakians fought back hard. They were bigger and stronger than humans. Their weapons were powerful. But the humans had something the Varakians did not understand. They had rage. They had purpose. They fought like demons possessed. Ryan led his squad through the base. They cleared building after building. Varakians fell before them. Some surrendered. Most did not. The fighting was close and bloody. Ryan lost 2 soldiers from his squad. Good men who died fighting for something bigger than themselves. By the end of the day, the base had fallen. 10,000 Varakian soldiers were dead or captured. The human flag flew over the command center. The siege that was supposed to last months had ended in 6 hours. News of the victory spread through the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement. The Varakians had been defeated. The humans had won. On the Varakian homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session. They could not believe the reports. Kethros 4 had fallen? Impossible. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be afraid. This changes nothing, Council Leader Vethrak said. But his voice was not as confident as before. We will send our main fleet. We will crush them. The Varakian armada gathered. 300 warships, the pride of the Dominion. They were larger than human ships. They had more weapons. They had crews that had been fighting for generations. The 2 fleets met in a region of space called the Crimson Nebula. The nebula glowed red and orange, filled with gas and dust. It was beautiful and dangerous. It would become a graveyard. Admiral Donovan studied the enemy formation. The Varakians were confident. They spread their ships wide, trying to surround the human fleet. They expected an easy victory. Nicole Vance spoke through the command channel. Admiral, they are making the mistake we predicted. They think their size is enough. They do not know about our new missiles. Chris nodded. Human scientists had developed a new weapon in the months before the war. Quantum torpedoes that could bypass Varakian shields. The enemy did not know about them. They were about to find out. All ships, target their capital ships first, Chris ordered. Fire at will. The human fleet opened fire. Hundreds of quantum torpedoes streaked through space. They passed through Varrokian shields like they were not there. They slammed into hulls and exploded. The Varrokians were stunned. Their shields had always protected them before. Now they were useless. Ship after ship erupted in flames. The battle lasted 12 hours. It was the largest space battle in recorded history. Ships burned, crews died, the nebula filled with wreckage and bodies. The Vengeance took heavy damage. A Varrokian ship rammed it directly. Explosions tore through the lower decks. Hundreds of crew members died. But the ship kept fighting. Admiral Donovan refused to retreat. "We did not come here to run," he said. "We came here to win." In the end, the humans won. The Varrokian armada was broken. Only 60 of their ships escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured. The Crimson Nebula earned a new name that day. The humans called it Victory's Garden. The path to the Varrokian homeworld was open. On the surface of Kethros 4, Ryan Brooks sat among the ruins of the enemy base. His armor was dented and burned. His face was covered in dirt and blood. But he was alive. He pulled out the picture of his sister. It was wrinkled and stained now. He looked at it for a long time. "We did it, Sarah," he whispered. "We showed them." Above him, the human fleet regrouped. More soldiers landed to secure the moon. Supplies arrived. Medical teams treated the wounded. Engineers began repairs. The war was not over. But humanity had proven something important. They could win. They could beat the enemy that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. The message was clear. Do not hurt our children. Do not think we are weak. Do not underestimate humanity. The Varrokians had learned this lesson in fire and blood. And there was more to come. The Varrokian High Council sat in silence. The news from the Crimson Nebula had broken them. Their great armada was gone. Their forward bases had fallen. The humans were advancing toward the homeworld. Council leader Vathrak looked older now. The confidence had drained from his face. He had ruled for 200 years. He had never known defeat like this. "We must negotiate," one council member said. "We must seek peace before they reach our cities." "Never," another replied. "We are Varrokians. We do not surrender to lesser species." The argument continued for hours. Some wanted peace. Some wanted to fight to the end. They could not agree on anything. In his private chambers, Kethrol watched the news reports. The human fleet was getting closer every day. The medals on his chest felt heavy now. The cheers had stopped. The interviews had stopped. No one called him a hero anymore. He had killed a child and thought it would make his people stronger. Instead, it had awakened a monster. But Kethrol was not afraid. He was a killer, not a coward. If the humans wanted him, they would have to come and get him. The council had promised to protect him. He was safe on the homeworld. The humans would never dare attack the capital. He was wrong. Captain Derek Hunt led a special operations team called the Shadow Hunters. They were the best soldiers humanity had. They did the impossible missions. They went where regular troops could not go. Derek was 40 years old, with a shaved head and cold blue eyes. He had spent 20 years in special forces. He had done things that would never appear in any official record. He was very good at finding people who did not want to be found. His orders were simple. Find Kethrol, capture him alive, bring him back to face justice. Each one was an expert in something different: combat, hacking, infiltration, languages, explosives. They had trained together for years. They trusted each other completely. They studied everything known about the Varrokian homeworld. They learned the language. They memorized the maps. They practiced wearing Varrokian clothing and moving like Varakians. When they were ready, they left the fleet in a captured enemy shuttle. The shuttle had been taken during the battle at Kethros 4. It still had valid codes. The Varakians would not suspect it. The journey took 3 days. Derek spent the time reviewing their plan. Every detail had to be perfect. One mistake would get them all killed. The shuttle landed at a cargo port on the homeworld. Varakian guards checked their codes and waved them through. The shadow hunters walked into the enemy capital without firing a shot. The city was vast and dark. Buildings rose like black towers toward the gray sky. Millions of Varakians lived here. They walked through streets made of polished stone. They spoke in clicking voices. They did not notice the humans among them. Derek and his team moved through the shadows. They wore cloaks that hid their faces. They had devices that masked their human scent. They looked like traders from a distant colony. Intelligence reports said Kethrol was being held in a secure compound near the council chambers. The compound had high walls, armed guards, and advanced security systems. Getting inside would be the hardest part. They spent 2 days watching the compound. They studied the guard rotations. They found weak points in the security. They waited for the right moment. While they waited, the main human fleet engaged what was left of the Varakian navy. Admiral Donovan led the attack from the Vengeance. His ship was still damaged from the last battle, but he refused to transfer its flag. The battle was fierce. The Varakians fought desperately to protect their homeworld. They threw everything they had at the human fleet. Ships exploded on both sides. Thousands died in the cold of space. Nicole Vance coordinated the attack from her station. She tracked every ship, every missile, every movement. She saw patterns in the chaos. She gave orders that saved countless lives. Carrier Group 7 moved to Sector 9. Destroyer Squadron 4, cover their flank. Cruiser Thunderbolt, you have 3 enemy ships incoming. Her voice never wavered. Her hands never shook. She was a machine of war, cold and precise. The battle lasted 8 hours. When it ended, the Varakian fleet was destroyed. The path to the homeworld was clear. Human ships took position in orbit. Their weapons pointed down at the cities below. On the surface, panic spread through the population. They had never seen enemy ships in their sky before. They had always been the conquerors, not the conquered. The High Council sent a message to the human fleet. They were ready to talk about peace. They would agree to human demands. They would pay reparations. They would disarm their offensive fleets. But they had one condition. They would not hand over Kethrol. Admiral Donovan received the message. He read it carefully. Then he sent his reply. No deal. We want the assassin. All other negotiations start after we have him. The council refused. They could not give up their hero. It would make them look weak. It would destroy what was left of their pride. But it did not matter what the council decided, because Derek Hunt was already inside the compound. The shadow hunters struck at midnight. They cut through the security fence with plasma torches. They disabled the cameras with EMP grenades. They moved through the darkness like ghosts. Guards fell silently, taken down with tranquilizer darts and silent blades. The team worked perfectly together. Each one knew their job. Each one executed without hesitation. Derek reached the main building. Intelligence said Kethrol was on the 3rd floor. He climbed the stairs with 2 of his teammates. The others secured the exits. They found Kethrol in a large room filled with trophies from his kills. Weapons hung on the walls. Pictures of his victims were displayed like art, and in the center, behind a desk, sat the assassin himself. Kethrol saw them coming. He grabbed a blade from his desk and attacked. He was fast. He was skilled. He had killed dozens of beings in close combat. But Derek was better. The fight lasted 30 seconds. Derek dodged the blade, blocked a strike, and swept Kethrol's legs out from under him. Before the assassin could recover, Derek was on top of him. He pressed a shock device to to Kethral's neck. The assassin's body went stiff, then limp. "Target secured," Derek said into his radio. "Extraction now." The team moved fast. They carried Kethral through the compound and into the streets. A shuttle was waiting at a pre-arranged location. They loaded the prisoner and lifted off. Varokian fighters tried to intercept them, but human ships from the fleet above provided cover. The shuttle escaped into orbit and docked with the Vengeance. Admiral Donovan met them in the hangar. He looked at Kethral, still unconscious on the stretcher. This was the being who had started it all. This was the monster who had killed Katie Morgan. "Good work, Captain," Chris said. "Justice will be served." Derek nodded. He was tired. They all were. But the mission was complete. Kethral would face trial on Earth. The whole galaxy would watch. Kethral woke up in a cell. The walls were white and smooth. A light hummed above his head. He was alone for the first time in months. He tried to move, but found his wrists and ankles were bound. The restraints were strong. Even with his 4 arms, he could not break free. He was trapped. A door opened. A human walked in. He was not a soldier. He wore a simple suit and carried a folder. He sat down across from Kethral and studied him with calm eyes. "My name is Andrew Page," the man said. "I am the prosecutor assigned to your case. You will stand trial for the murder of Katie Morgan. Do you understand?" Kethral said nothing. He just stared at the human with hate in his black eyes. Andrew nodded. "You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to representation. A Varokian lawyer has been assigned to defend you, as per the agreement between our peoples." Kethral refused to speak. The trial took place on Earth, in the city of Geneva. The courtroom was filled with cameras that broadcast to every human world and every alien species that wanted to watch. Billions of beings witnessed the proceedings. Ambassador Richard Morgan sat in the front row. He looked thin and tired. His hair had gone gray in the months since his daughter's death. But his eyes were sharp. He wanted to see justice done. Kethral was brought into the courtroom in chains. He walked with his head high. He showed no fear and no remorse. When he passed by Richard Morgan, he smiled. Richard did not react. He just watched. He had waited for this moment for a long time. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses testified. Evidence was presented. The holographic message that Kethral had left beside Katie's body was played for the court. "Know your place, humans." Kethral's lawyer argued that the assassin had been following orders from the Varokian High Council. He was a soldier doing his duty. He should not be held responsible. The prosecution argued differently. Andrew Page stood before the court and spoke clearly. "Orders do not excuse murder. Duty does not excuse killing a child. This being made a choice. He chose to take a blade and push it through the heart of a 17-year-old girl who had done nothing wrong. She was not a soldier. She was not a threat. She was a child who wanted to see the stars." He pointed at Kethral. He did not kill her because he had to. He killed her because he wanted to send a message, because he wanted to make us afraid, because he thought we would do nothing. Andrew paused. He looked at the cameras. He knew billions were watching. We did something, and now he will pay for what he did. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned with a verdict. Guilty. Kethral showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He stood straight and said nothing. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony at the edge of human space. He would never see his homeworld again. As he was led from the courtroom, he passed by Richard Morgan one more time. The ambassadors stood up. Their eyes met. "My daughter wanted to learn your language," Richard said quietly. "She thought your people were beautiful. She wanted to build bridges between our species." Kethral stopped. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. Something like doubt. You killed that dream when you killed her, Richard continued. You did not break us. You united us. You did not make us afraid. You made us strong. And now you will spend the rest of your life remembering that. The guards pulled Kethril away. He did not look back. 1 month after the trial, the peace treaty was signed. The ceremony took place on Nexus Prime, in the same observation deck where Katie Morgan had died. It was deliberate. No one would be allowed to forget what had started this war. Ambassador Morgan represented humanity. He stood at the same window where his daughter had once looked at the stars. The glass had been cleaned. There was no trace of what had happened there. The Varakian representative was Council Leader Vethrock himself. He had lost everything: his fleet, his power, his pride. He signed the treaty with shaking hands. The terms were harsh. The Varakians would pay reparations to every human colony. They would dismantle their offensive fleet. They would allow human ships to travel freely through their space. And they would build a memorial to Katie Morgan that would stand for 1,000 years. Vethrak signed each term without argument. He had no choice. His people had been beaten. They had to accept. When the ceremony was over, Richard Morgan walked to the window. He stood where his daughter had stood. He looked out at the stars. Someone touched his shoulder. He turned to find Admiral Chris Donovan standing beside him. "We did everything we could," Chris said softly. Richard nodded. Tears ran down his face. "I know, but it does not bring her back." "No," Chris agreed. "It does not. But maybe it means no other father will have to feel what you feel. Maybe it means other children are safe because of what we did." Richard looked at the stars. He tried to see them the way Katie had seen them, full of wonder, full of possibility. "She would have been proud," he whispered. "She would have wanted peace, not war. But she would have understood why we did what we did." The soldiers of Katie's Legion returned home as heroes. 500,000 had left Earth. 400,000 came back. The others had given their lives in the war. Ryan Brooks landed in Texas on a hot summer day. He walked off the transport ship and into the arms of his mother. She cried and held him tight. She had been so afraid she would lose him too. He visited 2 graves that week. First his sister Sarah, then a memorial that had been built for Katie Morgan in Houston. He left his medals at both. He did not know what to do with himself after the war. He had fought for so long. Now there was nothing to fight. He felt empty. But slowly, life returned to normal. He got a job. He met a woman. He started to laugh again. The anger faded. The memories remained, but they did not hurt as much. Admiral Chris Donovan retired from the Navy. He moved to a small house by the sea and spent his days fishing. His granddaughter Emma visited every weekend. They would sit on the beach and watch the waves. Sometimes she asked him about the war. He told her the truth. Not the glory, not the victory. The truth, the fear, the loss, the cost. "War is terrible," he said. "But sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes you have to fight to protect what you love." Nicole Vance became an admiral at age 34, the youngest in human history. She commanded the fleet that guarded human space. No alien empire would threaten humanity again while she watched. Across the galaxy, the story of the war spread. Other species heard what had happened. They learned the lesson that the Varakians had learned. A Thelian diplomat met with a young species that was considering attacking human colonies. The diplomat was old and wise. He had seen many things in his long life. "You do not understand what humans are. They seem soft. They seem weak. They smile and laugh and cry. They love their children more than they love themselves." He leaned forward. "But if you hurt their children, they will burn worlds to find justice. They will cross the galaxy to hunt you down. They will never stop. They will never forget. The Varokians thought they could frighten humanity with one death. Instead, they woke a sleeping giant. The young species listened. They decided not to attack. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, a statue of Katie Morgan stood in a garden. It showed her as she had been in life, young, smiling, looking up at the sky with wonder in her eyes. Flowers surrounded the statue. Fresh ones were placed there every day. People came from all over the world to see it. They left notes and gifts and prayers. At the base of the statue, a simple inscription was carved into the stone. "We did not forget." The stars shone down on the statue at night. The same stars Katie had loved. The same stars she had died watching. And somewhere out in the vastness of space, humanity continued to grow. They built new colonies. They explored new worlds. They made friends with species who respected them. They were no longer the young newcomers. They were a force to be feared and respected. All because they loved one of their own, enough to move heaven and earth for her. The message had been received. The year was 2247. Humanity had spread across the stars. 12 colony worlds carried the flag of Earth, and billions of humans lived among the distant suns. It was a time of hope. It was a time of growth, but it was also a time of danger. The Varokian Dominion had ruled their part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black like the void between stars. They looked at humans the way a man looks at insects. To them, humanity was nothing, just another young species that would learn its place or be crushed. On the neutral trading station called Nexus Prime, diplomats from both species met to discuss trade and borders. The station floated in the space between their territories. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be neutral ground. Ambassador Richard Morgan had brought his daughter Katie to the station. She was 17 years old, with brown hair and bright green eyes. Katie had begged her father to let her come. She wanted to see the aliens. She wanted to learn their language. She dreamed of becoming a translator someday, a bridge between species. Richard loved his daughter more than anything in the universe. His wife had died when Katie was young, and he had raised her alone. She was his whole world. When she smiled, he forgot all his worries. When she laughed, he felt like the luckiest man alive. The diplomatic gathering took place in the Grand Hall of Nexus Prime. Hundreds of humans and Varokians filled the room. They talked and drank and pretended to be friendly. But underneath the smiles, there was tension. The Varokians did not want humans expanding into their territory. The humans did not want to be pushed around. Katie walked through the crowd with wonder in her eyes. She had already learned 3 alien languages from books and recordings. Now she tried to listen to the Varokians speak. Their words were harsh and clicking, but she found them beautiful. She wandered away from her father. She wanted to see the observation deck. The station had huge windows that looked out at the stars. Katie had always loved the stars. When she was a little girl, her father would take her to the roof of their house on Earth. They would lie on blankets and count the lights in the sky. The observation deck was empty when Katie arrived. She stood at the window and looked out at the endless black. Stars sparkled like diamonds scattered on velvet. A nearby nebula glowed purple and gold. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and smiled. She did not hear the footsteps behind her. Kethrol was a Varokian assassin. He had killed many times before. His masters on the High Council had given him a simple mission: send a message to the humans. Show them that they were not welcome. Make them afraid. He had watched the human girl wander away from the crowd. She was young and alone. She was perfect. Kethrol moved like a shadow. His 4 arms were strong and fast. In his hand, he carried a blade made from Varokian steel. It was black and curved and very sharp. Katie turned around. She saw the alien standing there. For a moment, she was not afraid. She thought maybe he wanted to talk. She opened her mouth to say hello in his language. The blade went through her heart. Katie fell to her knees. She looked down at her chest. She did not understand what had happened. There was no pain at first. Just confusion. Just cold. Kethral pulled out the blade and stepped back. He placed a small device on the floor. A hologram appeared above it. His face, speaking a message in both languages. Know your place, humans. This is what happens when you reach too far. Go back to your little world, or more will die. Katie tried to call for help, but no sound came out. The last thing she saw was the stars outside the window. They blurred and faded. Then there was nothing. Her father found her 20 minutes later. Richard Morgan had noticed his daughter was missing. He had searched the gathering hall. He had asked everyone if they had seen her. A growing fear had filled his chest. He ran through the corridors, calling her name. When he reached the observation deck, he saw her lying on the floor. The blood had spread around her in a dark pool. The hologram was still playing its message on repeat. Richard fell to his knees beside his daughter. He pulled her into his arms. Her body was still warm. Her eyes were open, but they saw nothing. He screamed. The sound echoed through the station. It was the sound of a heart breaking. Security officers came running. Medics came too, but there was nothing they could do. Katie Morgan was dead. The news spread fast. Within an hour, every human on the station knew. Within a day, every human on every colony world knew. The footage of the hologram message was broadcast on every channel. Billions of people watched. Billions of people saw the face of the assassin. Billions of people heard his words. And billions of people grew angry. On Earth, President Daniel Hayes watched the footage in his office. His hands shook. He had grandchildren the same age as Katie. He thought about what he would do if someone hurt them. His jaw tightened. His eyes grew hard. He called an emergency meeting of the United Nations. Every leader from every nation attended. The room was silent as they watched the footage together. When it ended, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, President Hayes stood up. He walked to the podium. His voice was steady but cold. They wanted to send us a message, he said. They killed a child to make us afraid. They murdered a 17-year-old girl who just wanted to look at the stars. His hands gripped the podium. They think we are weak. They think we will run and hide. They think we will accept this and do nothing. He looked out at the assembled leaders. Every face was grim. Every eye was focused on him. They are wrong. We will not hide. We will not accept. We will not forget. His voice rose. They wanted to send us a message. Now we will send one back. A message written in fire and steel. A message they will remember for 10,000 years. The room erupted in agreement. There was no debate. There was no discussion. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth stood united. Not for conquest, not for greed, but for justice. For a girl who died looking at the stars. The war had begun.